She knew time was running out. Every second was crucial, and even under pressure, the nurse faced the impossible to save a life. But what she didn't know is that night, she wouldn't just save a life. She would face her own dark past. Prepare yourself for a story of resilience, mystery, and unexpected revelations. If you thought the story was already intense, wait until you see what comes next. Stay with me until the end, because the twist will surprise you. And if you want more stories like this, leave a like and subscribe now so you don't miss a thing. Emily's journey is just beginning, and what comes next will change everything. Don't miss the next chapters. I guarantee you won't want to stop watching. I always knew that working as a nurse at a Chicago hospital would be challenging, but that day, something told me it would be different. The hospital was busier than usual, and I, Emily, felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. It was already early in the morning when I walked into the emergency room, ready for another long shift. But seeing the medical team gathered, I knew something was about to change. Then the sound of sirens echoed through the hallway, and the ambulance arrived urgently. A 35-year-old man, seriously injured after being hit by a car, was rushed to the emergency room. Chaos ensued. There were other critically ill patients, and doctors were scattered among them, treating what they could. I didn't hesitate for a second. Without waiting for instructions, I approached the man who was already on the verge of death, showing clear signs of shock. He was breathing heavily, and his blood pressure was already dangerously low. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, felt a deep sense of fear. But something inside me made me react quickly. I knew he only had a few minutes left. I was the first to begin first aid, my hand pressed against his chest as I thought of all the classes, training sessions, and moments I'd prepared for something like this. But I'd never been so close to losing someone. Time seemed to be against me, and the hospital, with all its hustle and bustle, kept me focused. As he fought for his life, I knew my only chance to save him was to act without hesitation. With each heartbeat that faded, with each breath that became more labored, I could think of nothing but one thing: saving that life. After stabilizing the patient, my heart was still pounding. The man was unconscious, but now, at least he was breathing more easily. It was hard to explain, but I knew every second counted. The medical team finally gathered around me, but the head physician, Dr. Simmons, had a skeptical look on his face. He gave me a curious, almost challenging look. He had always been a man of few words, but at that moment he seemed more distant than ever. I knew he was watching me, analyzing my every move, probably questioning my ability to make decisions on my own. As the team treated the man, I took the opportunity to get a better look at his face. What shocked me was how familiar he looked, but no, it couldn't be. I knew that kind of pain, that desperate look. I'd seen so many people in similar circumstances, but there was something about this man that drew me to him. Something I couldn't explain, but it was starting to bother me deeply. When I saw him finally stabilized, I gathered my courage and went to speak to one of the assistants. That man, no matter how hard I tried to ignore the feeling, seemed to be part of a memory I didn't want to recall. He was hovering between life and death, but my mind was completely focused on something else, something that seemed to connect me to him in an inexplicable way. As I looked around the team, observing each of the doctors and assistants, I realized how immersed they were in their routine. They were seasoned professionals, each with their own personal dramas, but nothing could prepare me for what was about to happen. Something was brewing in that room, something that went beyond simply caring for a patient. As the man continued to fight for his life, the tension in the hospital only grew. I felt a heavy weight on my shoulders, but I knew I had to remain calm. Dr. Simmons, despite his quiet observations, couldn't hide his concern. He approached me after a while, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hallway. "You did well to take the lead, Emily," he said with a tight smile, but his eyes were fixed on the patient. "But that doesn't mean he'll get out of this easily. His situation is critical." His words echoed in my mind, but something else nagged at me. I knew the case was far from solved, but there was something in that man's gaze that seemed to call to me, as if he knew something I didn't. When he finally woke up, what happened next left me completely surprised. He woke abruptly, his eyes flying open, and before anyone could react, he looked directly at me. His eyes were empty, but there was something else there, something intense, something familiar. He murmured my name. "Emily," he spoke in a hoarse, barely audible voice. My stomach turned. A feeling of déjà vu washed over me. I knew this man shouldn't know me. The name was common, but I had the feeling he knew something about me, something I'd forgotten, something I didn't want to remember. What did he mean? What was going on? At first, I tried to ignore what seemed like delusion. Perhaps his condition was altering his perception of reality, but the next few minutes were disturbing. He repeated my name again, louder and louder, as if something were trying to break through the barrier between us. "Don't you remember me, Emily?" he asked, his eyes fixed on mine. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The feeling of unease intensified, but there was something there that couldn't be ignored. Dr. Simmons, now visibly concerned, asked me to step aside, but the connection, though strange, was becoming harder to deny. As I tried to process what was happening to that man, the pressure in the hospital only slowly increased. Other patients were being brought into the emergency room, and the staff was overwhelmed. The atmosphere in the hospital was tense, but the mystery surrounding that patient wouldn't let me rest. I didn't know what to do with the feeling that something much deeper was going on there. Night fell, and despite my exhaustion, my mind was far from restful. I decided to head to the doctor's break room to try to understand what was happening. I went to the medicine cabinet to get something to calm me down, but on the way, I ran into Dr. Simmons again. He was alone, looking over a stack of documents. "Emily," he began, his expression more serious than usual. "There's something strange going on with that patient. He has no medical records nor any valid identification, and most importantly, he's recovering very quickly, faster than would be possible considering the severity of the accident." This made me wonder, how could he be recovering so quickly? It was impossible, wasn't it? What made me most uneasy was what he'd said while he was awake. He'd mentioned something about the past, something I couldn't understand. My mind, already overwhelmed with fatigue, began to race. I didn't want to overthink it, but the feeling that I knew this man wouldn't go away. And worse, my intuition told me that this man had a direct connection to a very important moment in my life, something I had left behind, something I no longer wanted to remember. Meanwhile, the patient was being observed by other doctors, but I couldn't deny the fact that I was more involved with him than any other member of the team. I needed to find out more. I needed to understand what was happening before it was too late. The night was far advanced, and the hospital never seemed to rest. I still couldn't get the patient's face out of my mind. Something about him made me feel as if I'd been transported to a distant past, a past I didn't want to remember. That early morning, the tension reached its peak. Something unexpected happened, something that completely changed the course of everything. It was almost impossible to concentrate with the weight of so many unanswered questions. I was heading back to the emergency room when, as I passed the intensive care ward, I heard a strange noise coming from the room where the patient was. My steps instinctively quickened, and a sense of urgency overcame me. When I entered the room, the patient was standing, his hands resting on the edge of the bed as if trying to get up. "You shouldn't be standing. Your body isn't stable yet," I said, running over to him. He looked at me, his eyes fixed intently on me, and then, for the first time, he smiled. "Do you remember me, Emily?" he said with disconcerting calm. "I know what happened. I know what you did." His words fell on me like a heavy weight. I froze, a wave of panic hitting me. How did he know my name? And what did he mean by, "What did you do?" There was nothing in the past to justify that sense of recognition, but something inside me began to stir, as if the truth were on the verge of being revealed. Before I could react, he took a step toward me, his gaze fixed on my eyes. It was as if he was waiting for something to trigger inside me, something I hadn't even known existed. "I am the key to what you don't remember, Emily. The key to everything." The atmosphere around us seemed to have stopped. The chaos of the hospital, the feeling of time passing, everything vanished for an instant. He seemed to know something profound, something I had lost, and I had no idea how to deal with it. Fear and confusion mingled in my chest, but at the same time, something deeper was emerging, a desire to discover the truth no matter the cost. I was speechless. What he said, that mysterious statement, wouldn't leave me alone. He knew something about me, something I couldn't remember. With every step he took toward me, my confusion grew. How could he know my name? How did he know there was something I'd forgotten? And what did it mean to be the key to something? I tried to act rationally, trying to push away the thoughts that consumed me, but the truth was, I was in shock. This man, who had been run over and was on the verge of death, seemed to have more control over the situation than I did. He was recovering at an impressive rate, but it wasn't just his physical condition that was altered. He was messing with my mind. The other doctors arrived in the room shortly after, but upon seeing the man standing there, they were all as surprised as I was. Dr. Simmons was the first to react, yelling at him to get back on the bed and lie down immediately. "Emily, what's going on here?" he asked, his tone now thick with concern. I didn't know what to say. How could I explain what I didn't understand? At first, we tried to give him medication to sedate him, but he resisted. His deep, fixed gaze seemed to reveal something within us. He didn't want to be controlled. He was aware of what was happening in a way no one could explain. I knew I needed to find out more. The feeling that he was connected to something important in my life intensified with each passing moment. I looked at Dr. Simmons and, speechless, made the decision to investigate on my own. Something was wrong, and I needed to find out the truth, even if it meant breaking rules, facing my own ghosts, and questioning what really happened at the hospital. What I didn't know was that the consequences of my actions would go beyond all expectations. Something dark was lurking, and I was about to find out. After the incident in the emergency room, I knew my life would never be the same. I, Emily, an ordinary nurse until that moment, found myself involved in something much bigger than I could have imagined. The patient, who somehow seemed to know everything about me, was challenging me to face my own past, a past I'd rather keep buried. That night, after everyone left, I locked myself in my break room room. The pressure in the hospital was immense, but I couldn't get the man out of my mind. He was a riddle that needed to be solved, and somehow I knew the key to solving this mystery lay within me, or at least within what I had forgotten. Over time, I began to investigate his medical records, but they were incomplete, as if someone were trying to erase every clue. The connection I felt with him seemed to deepen with each passing minute. I knew I was taking a risk, but I couldn't stop. I needed to understand. I began to realize that the past I had tried to hide was returning in a frightening way, but it also awakened a sense of urgency within me. It was as if the man was calling me to face what I had lost and couldn't remember. Each detail I discovered was like a puzzle piece, falling into place, slowly but clearly. As a nurse, I had been trained to handle extreme situations, but now I was dealing with something much deeper. I was dealing with the very core of my identity. The nurse I was being challenged to become someone different, someone stronger and more capable of handling the truth, no matter how frightening. That's when a memory came flooding back, like a vivid flash. I remembered an incident that had happened years ago, something I tried to forget, a tragedy. I was involved in a situation that would change everything forever. The man, now in the hospital, was directly linked to that event, and he knew it. But the scariest thing was that he knew more about me than I did. The decision was made. I needed to face what I had lost, and perhaps that man was the only person capable of showing me the way. The hospital was busier than ever, and my mind was divided between the patients and the search for answers about the mysterious man. The connection between us deepened, and the more I investigated, the more uneasy I felt. Something was about to happen. I could feel it deep in my soul. What bothered me most was the feeling that I was being watched, as if someone knew everything I was doing. I took a few days off from the hospital, trying to process the findings, but even outside of work, I couldn't forget the man. I knew he was being monitored, but there was always a feeling he was expecting something from me, something I didn't yet understand. I decided to visit him again in the intensive care ward. When I entered, he was lying down, his eyes fixed on the door. When he saw me, an enigmatic smile appeared on his face. He didn't say a word, but what happened next chilled me to the core. "You know what to do, Emily," he said, his voice low but filled with frightening conviction. "You have the answers. It's time for you to confront the truth." Each of his words felt like a ton of weight. I was on the verge of losing control, but I knew I had to keep going. I was beginning to understand that what he wanted wasn't just to remind me of the past, but to force me to face something much bigger, something about my own identity and what I represented to the hospital. I walked over to the control table, where the doctors were watching the patient's monitors. "He'll get better now, won't he?" I asked, my voice shaking, trying to understand what was happening. But when I looked at the monitor, the patient was still, as if waiting for something I hadn't yet grasped. The tension was rising with every second, and I knew a decision was about to be made, a decision that would change everything. The atmosphere in the hospital was dense, as if time had slowed down. I could no longer ignore the truth. This man, this patient, was somehow connected to something much larger and much darker than anything I could imagine. He knew about me, knew something I had buried deep in my past. I, who spent my days saving lives, now stood on the edge of an abyss, confronting a truth I wasn't ready to face. That night, as the hospital lights flickered due to a power outage, I was called to the intensive care ward. When I entered the room, the patient was standing, as always, watching me with the same piercing eyes. He was calm, but I could feel the tension in the air. Something was about to happen, and I didn't know what to expect. "You know what happened, Emily," he said, his voice soft but filled with unquestionable authority. "You were responsible for everything. You brought me here." His words echoed in my mind, a growing echo I could no longer ignore. I felt my breath catch, my entire body tense. "What are you saying?" I asked, trying to remain calm, but my hands began to tremble. He took a step forward. "You were the last person I saw, the last person I was with in that accident." The revelation was like a punch in the gut. The accident, I remembered. It wasn't just a distant memory, it was a bitter truth I'd tried to bury. I'd been involved in an accident that took the life of someone very close to me, someone I loved deep. He was talking about me. He was accusing me, but at the same time he was giving me a chance to make amends. He knew I was responsible for his death, and now he was here to make me pay. Before I could react, the patient's heart monitor began beeping. His condition worsened dramatically in a matter of seconds, and the medical team panicked, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. I knew there was something between us that went beyond doctor-patient, something that connected me directly to his story. The truth was there right in front of me, and the weight of guilt began to take over me. Chaos gripped the intensive care unit. The medical team was frantic, trying to stabilize the patient, but he seemed increasingly distant from life. I watched helplessly as the monitors beeped incessantly. My heart raced, not only from the urgency of the moment, but from the crushing guilt weighing down on me. That man's revelation had been the turning point, something I would never forget. But as the doctors worked frantically, I finally understood. What he wanted from me wasn't revenge. He wasn't here to destroy me. He wanted me to face the truth. He wanted me to accept what I had done and, more importantly, to find a way to redeem myself. What happened next was beyond my control. The patient, who was on the brink of death, suddenly began to improve. Miraculously, he was stabilized. The medical team was stunned, but I knew what was happening. He wasn't simply recovering, he was giving me a chance to right the wrong of the past. When he finally opened his eyes and looked at me for the last time, he didn't say a word. He just smiled, as if he knew I understood everything. And with that, he was gone, leaving behind not only the mystery, but the opportunity for change. I had redeemed myself, or at least taken the first step. After that incident, my life was never the same. The hospital continued its routine, but I knew that somehow something inside me had changed. The guilt and the weight of the truth slowly dissipated, and although I didn't know exactly what that man represented, I knew he had shown me the importance of acceptance and redemption. I never spoke about what happened that day. The mystery remained intact, but the lesson I learned stayed with me. Some truths must be faced before we can truly move forward. If you were as immersed in this story as I was, share your own thoughts in the comments. How do you think Emily would handle this situation in real life? What would have made you make the same or even different decisions? If you enjoyed this plot, don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Also, subscribe for more exciting and mysterious stories like this. Your opinion is crucial so we can continue creating incredible content for you. Let's connect and explore more heartwarming stories together.